уважаемые участники нашей феминистской школы. I would like to present you our first speaker, Mr. Lado Mkervalishvili. Sorry, it's
Lado.
Lado Mkervalishvili.
Mkervalishvili.
No, Lado is enough. Just Lado.
Lado. Well, and if you're ready, please, it's your floor now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, let me express my greetings to everyone. And first of all, let me express my sincere appreciation every single person participating in this event. I'm very grateful for giving me this opportunity, definitely. Special thanks for organizers to the event and the Gender Network Eastern Partnership for their dedication and outstanding work. I'm Lado, just Lado. I'm Vladimir, but Lado is my nickname. Georgian name is Lado, and I'm elected member of the GREIVIO from Georgia. Special congratulations for having female and pro-European president to Belarus for Moldovan participants. I see that we have now here the persons who are quite experienced in the gender and human rights issues, and so I will try not to be very boring today, and will very briefly talk about the GREIVIO and Istanbul Convention. So if you allow me, I would like to share my presentation, and maybe it will be better to follow this presentation. As usual, it happens that the presentations are short and the speakers are talking a lot of, so I'd like to change this experience, and I will talk the same things what will be in the presentations. We will have the we need same time for this, and now I will try to share screen and share presentations.
Okay, and if participants would like to ask questions, please use the chat for it.
Sure. Okay. Or maybe you can ask directly, interrupt me and ask directly, because sometimes it's not very easy to follow chat and presentations at the same time. So you can interrupt me anytime with any questions. Feel very free for this, and I will try to meet your expectations and questions, but I would like to inform you that I'm very limited in expression and evaluation of the domestic violence issues, especially particularly in Georgia. Dear Georgian colleagues, don't ask me to do this, because now Georgia is in the process of evaluation, and the questionnaire is already submitted, and the government of Georgia already developed the report. So any statement from my side may be understood in another way, both by government and opposition or NGOs. So I have the strict restriction on this, and don't think that I'm avoiding the answering of the question. Simply, I have no right and mandate on this issues to evaluate the situations, especially particularly from the Georgian perspective. So if you allow me, I will try, and I would like to talk today about the ratification of the convention in Eastern Partnership countries, the contextual background of the convention, the monitoring mechanisms, and an intersectional lens, non-discrimination, and the measures towards the migrant and refugee women. I would like to share the myths about the Istanbul Convention and the early impact of the convention. The history of the Istanbul Convention you know that since 1990s, the Council of Europe had set the initiatives to fight violence against women, and the Council of Europe issued the recommendation of the Committee of Ministers on the protection of women against violence, and this recommendation was adopted in 2002, and the first Europe-wide campaigning to combat violence against women, including domestic violence, ran from 2006 to 2008. And after that, the Parliamentary Assembly also adopted the resolutions and recommendations calling for legally binding standards on violence against women and domestic violence. And after that, there was an established special body. It was called GREIVIO. It was in 2008, and GREIVIO, it is a committee of the ministers which was set up, an expert group included the expert group, and the goal of the GREIVIO was to prepare the draft text of the convention. And GREIVIO was represented by the Council of Europe members states representatives and they have provided 8 meetings during the 2009-2010, and their final meeting was in 2011, and during these 8 meetings they have developed the text of the convention, and in 2011 they have finalized the text of the explanatory memorandum. And after that, in 2011, the Istanbul Convention was opened for signature, and in 2018, the Council of Europe members, except Azerbaijan, Belarus, and Russia, have signed the Istanbul Convention. On March 2012, Turkey was the first country who ratified the Istanbul Convention, and in 2014, the Istanbul Convention entered into force following 10th ratification, and the 10th ratificator country was then Andorra. Now we have the 34 Council of Members who have ratified the Istanbul Convention, and it's very important that no state has withdrawn from the convention yet. But but you know that there is a lot of challenges just now regarding the Istanbul Convention because an intensive campaigns have started to manipulate public opinions against the convention, and it is led by the ultra-religion groups in several countries such as Romania, Russia, Ukraine, Lithuania, Slovakia, Bulgaria, and Turkey. Unfortunately, the goal is to discredit the provisions of the convention through manipulation and false information. And as a response, Council of Europe engaged in exposing and debunking the myths of the Istanbul Convention. Against this movement, the good example is Croatia, and because they had success in countering manipulation and ignorance, mainly after the signing of the convention in 2013, the Croatian government faced similar resistance from the certain far-right groups and from the opposition of the Roman Catholic Church, but the Zagreb government, together with the civil society, and civil society had a crucial role in this process, and the European Union also supported them, has succeeded in countering manipulation and propaganda, and they have ratified Istanbul Convention in July 2018. So we think that in spite of these tendencies and trends, there is also good examples, and so to avoid this propaganda, it's quite doable. Now I would like to very briefly talk about the Istanbul Convention in the Eastern Partnership countries, because it was indicated in my topic, so I'm not going to skip this, but I will do very briefly, as I guess here are people who are very much experienced and much more experienced than I am on this issue, but still I will try to do it very, very briefly. And I will start from Armenia. You know that convention was signed in Armenia in 2018, and last year it was ratification of the convention was planned, but unfortunately it's suspended because conservative figures in the countries, as well as representatives of the Armenian Apostolic Church, have slammed the convention, claiming it contradicts the Armenian constitution by implying a third gender. On the other hand, the human rights activists are playing a crucial role as everywhere and in Armenia also, and the human rights activists slammed opponents for turning a blind eye to violence and discussing it under the pretext of traditional values. On July, it is a very important issue that the government of the Armenia, Minister of the Justice of Armenia, requested an opinion of the Venice Commission on the constitutional implications of the ratification of the Istanbul Convention for Armenia. And very soon, in October 2019, a Venice Commission issued opinion and stated that, I will read the citations, that there are no provisions in that convention that could be said to contradict the constitution of Armenia. On the contrary, the main obligation of the Istanbul Convention, namely to prevent and combat any form of violation against women and domestic violence, already follows from the Constitution and from other human rights treaties to which Armenia is a state party. So it was very important statements in support of the Istanbul Convention, and we do hope that Armenia ratified the Istanbul Convention, and you know what's happening now in the world, but we do still hope that Armenia will ratify the Istanbul Convention. You know that Azerbaijan neither signed nor ratified the convention and is among those three countries who have not signed and ratified the conventions, and who have not signed the convention actually. And from the beginning, Mr. Saidov, head of the Azerbaijan delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the European country, stated that the Azerbaijan does not sign all conventions blindly. He says that we study each document, and only after we make sure that a particular convention complies with our legislation, we leave our signature under it. As for the Istanbul Convention, it should be recalled that Azerbaijan has always advocated gender equality, women's rights, but this time a detailed study of the document is also necessary. It was a statement by Mr. Saidov, head of the Azerbaijan delegation at the PESI, and in March 2020, this year, head of the European delegation noted that the European Union is currently preparing a new national action plan on gender issues designed for 4 years, and said that in all European projects in Azerbaijan, the gender issue is a priority, and he stated that it would be very positive if Azerbaijan joins the Istanbul Convention. So it was very clear message from the EU delegation to Azerbaijan for the Azerbaijan government that the signing, they are talking about just now about the signing of the convention is very important. And I think that the ongoing situation led to this also, because last year there was a huge rallies of women in Azerbaijan, and it was significant big signal, because the emerge of movement made up progressive and outspoken Azerbaijani women, not afraid to raise their voices over the usual traditional assumptions about women. After these protests in May 2020, this year, the head of the State Committee for Family, Women and Children Affairs announced that Azerbaijan would soon join the convention, but she gave no exact time frame. In case of Azerbaijan, we also do hope that they will even sign the text of Istanbul Convention. Next is Belarus. Belarus also still has neither signed or nor ratified the convention. Also, the government has implemented some measures to counteract gender-based violence. There is still a lack of profound protection, and the UN experts considering a woman's situation in Belarus have some issues, not some issues, quite alarming issues happening from this perspective also. And as UN experts notice that patriarchal attitude, which is significant factor of lack of gender inequality, and urged Belarus to implement dual instruments to eliminate it. The analysis of the willingness and the ability for countries to accede to the Istanbul Convention showed that there are no significant obstacles to possible accessions in these existing legislations, and the experts are considering that this is a political will, as well as the creation of the positive public opinion on the need for Belarus to join the convention, which will allow a more effective and comprehensive approach to the combating domestic violence. And there was a survey, and our respondents also note that the problem of possible criticisms and the opposition from the pro-life organizations, which is many European countries oppose the signing and accession to the convention. Last year, Civil Society Forum considered that the topic of the combating domestic violence and gender-based violence as one of the priorities, and intended to continue working in these directions in cooperation with a wide range of stakeholders. But all these abstracts are from the last year reviews, and so you know that the situation significantly changed in Belarus at this moment, and so I'm not confident that this issue still is very actual in the agenda at this moment. Yeah, Moldova also has new changes, but before this, the Republic of Moldova, you know, that signed the convention in February 2017. The situation was very dramatical in Moldova, as over the past 3 years, national legislation has undergone harmonization with the provisions of the treaty, and due to the delay in ratification on November 2019, several non-governmental organizations, platforms and activists launched a public call asking Prime Minister and the Parliament Speaker to ratify the convention by the end of the 2019, and consequently on December 11, 2019, the draft law on ratification of the convention was included on the agenda of the government meeting, but suddenly prior to this session the subject was removed from the agenda, and following of the public pressure on December 27, the issue was reintroduced on the agenda of the government meeting and approved the same day, but the according to the Moldova's legislation, president should issue the written note, but Moldova's president's written note have not been transmitted to the parliament, and now I hope that because of the new president, this issue will be solved very positively. Yes. As for Ukraine, yeah, in Moldova, actually, in Moldova is very ready to ratify the convention, and there are no legal reasons to delay ratification of the convention. And this year, the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, Dunia Mijatovic, has published a report on her visit to the Republic of Moldova, and her recommendations was also focused on violence against women and domestic violence, and the commissioner also urged the Moldovan authorities to ratify the Istanbul Convention without further delay, and she stated that the government should ensure that the public has accurate information about the true nature and scope of violence against women and domestic violence, and the measures envisaged in this Istanbul Convention to respond to and prevent this phenomena. I hope that the Moldova will ratify the Istanbul Convention very soon. As for Ukraine, Ukraine signed the Istanbul Convention in 2011, and Ukraine first came close to ratification in 2016, but it was rejected in the Rada by a majority. The reason was that the text of the convention, with its reference to sexual orientation and gender, was perceived to contradict Ukrainian traditions and Christian values. And the main threat, according to the majority, was represented by the very word gender, which was to be supply propagandizing same-sex marriage, and the final factor seeming to close all debates in 2016-2017 was the criticism of the convention leveled by various Ukrainian churches also. During the parliamentary electoral campaigns in 2019, the presidential party Servant of the People promised that the Istanbul Convention would be among the laws it would seek to ratify, but unfortunately that has not happened. And in January 2020, member of the parliament, Alexander Kornienko, one of the servant of the people leaders, said it was unlikely that the Rada would agree to ratify the convention, and that the presidential party would prefer to engage in mediation with all groups involved in the processes. And after the petition for ratification was submitted in June 2020, President Zelensky responded that he would propose ratification again only after the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Social Policy had endorsed it. And unfortunately, I don't know what's happening just now regarding this in Ukraine. Yeah, it was very briefly about the Istanbul Convention ratification and signature in the Eastern Partnership countries. I'm not going to talk about Georgia. You know that Georgia is the only country who ratified the Istanbul Convention, and I think that I have seen the agenda, and my colleagues and representatives from Georgia will talk very briefly about the issues focused on violence against women and domestic violence in Georgia, and about the implementation of the Istanbul Convention in Georgia. Now I would like to be focused on very core terms of the conventions very shortly, and the acts of violence covered by the scope of the conventions are the violence against women, and it's acts of gender-based violence that result in or are likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological, and economical harm. Another is domestic violence, acts of physical, sexual, psychological, or economical violence that occur within the family or domestic unit or between former and current spouses or partners. And gender-based violence, violence directed against women because they are women and that affects them disproportionately. and of course gender. The socially constructed rules, behaviors, activities, and attributes that is given society considers appropriate for women and men. The approaches adopted by the Istanbul Convention are the gender sensitive, which means that the party shall implement gender sensitive measures and acknowledge differences between men and women to promote gender equality. Of course, it's victim centered. It focuses on the human rights and the needs of the victims of the cases of violence covered by scope of convention. And cross-border approach, it's given the transnational nature of some forms of violence. The convention makes it obligatory for state parties to extend their jurisdiction to cover crime committed abroad by their national, and it facilitates access to justice for nationals who are victims of the violence against women abroad. As for monitoring the mechanisms, this will be a main point of my today presentation. It is a monitoring mechanism of the Istanbul Convention. It's a two-pillar system, and it means that it consists of two distinct but very interacting bodies. And the one body is GREIVIO. GREIVIO is a group of experts on action against violence, women, and domestic violence. And another body is the Committee of the Parties. It's a political body composed of the government representatives of all parties to the convention. So now I will talk about GREIVIO. GREIVIO is a specialized independent body responsible for monitoring the implementation of the convention by the countries that have ratified it, and it draws up and publishes reports evaluating legislation and other measures taken by these countries to give effect to the provisions of the convention. It's very important that the GREIVIO, in specific circumstances, it may initiate inquiries. It calls inquiry procedures, and it's very important procedures, and I will talk about these procedures very shortly below. GREIVIO may also adopt general recommendations on the stems and concepts of the convention. And who are the GREIVIO members? GREIVIO members are independent and impartial experts of the high moral character. This is written in the convention. This word is not from me and not about me. In the convention is written that the GREIVIO members are independent and impartial experts of the high moral character, known for their recognized competence in the fields of human rights, gender equality, violence against women, or assistance to and protection of victims, or having demonstrated relevant professional experience in the fields. And initially GREIVIO composed of 10 members, and GREIVIO enlarged to 15 members following the 25th ratification of the convention. It was in 2018, and so I was elected in 2018 as a GREIVIO member. So I introduced the special term in GREIVIO and said the first generation, second generation, and now we are 3 generations in GREIVIO. So I'm from the second generation members. Yeah, and
Я даже испугалась, говорю, что случилось? Выгнали со школы? Она говорит, мама.
Sorry. Okay, its membership takes into account a gender and geographical balance as well as multidisciplinary expertise, and GREIVIO members are elected by the committees of the parties among nationals of the parties to the convention, and come from various professional backgrounds: judges, prosecutors, academics, media, social workers, civil society representatives, etc. The term of office of GREIVIO members is 4 years, renewable once, and the committee of the parties shall be composed of the government representatives of all parties to the convention. The committee of the parties shall be convened by the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, and it shall be subsequently meet whenever one set of the parties, the President of the Committee of the Parties, or the Secretary General requests. The committee of the party shall adopt its own rules and procedures. How does GREIVIO carry out the evaluation? Evaluations are carried out on a country-by-country basis, and GREIVIO carries out the first evaluation of each country that has ratified the convention. We try to gather as much information as possible and try to ensure that the process is dialogue-oriented. According to the timetable, it will take GREIVIO approximately a year and a half to complete the full procedure for each country, from sending the questionnaire to publishing the GREIVIO report. Unfortunately, now because of the pandemic, this timing was a bit delayed, and we need some more time because we are not full eligibility to provide the visits in the countries. Steps in the first baseline evaluation procedure. There is 7 steps. Step first is reporting and information gathering. Step second is examination of the report. Step 3 is evaluation visits, including state dialogue. Step 4 is preparing the draft GREIVIO report. Step 5 is preparing and adopting the GREIVIO report, and the next step is publication and dissemination of the report, and the final step is the follow-up to the GREIVIO report. I will try to very briefly talk about these steps, and we are starting. We are starting that's from the beginning. The Secretariat sends notifications to state authority that they are expected to send us a report based on the questionnaire by a certain date. The state send in the report. Later, after this, NGOs or other bodies, NGOs and any other bodies, may also send in shadow reports and other information such as relevant reports from other Council of Europe, UN, or UN or other bodies are referred to also. The next step is the examination of the report and what's happening now. The report is put on the restricted website for all GREIVIO members to see, and also any other information gathered about the country also put on the restricted website. It may be shadow reports on any other reports on evaluations, and the appointed reporters together with the allocated members of the Secretariat pull out the main terms that require further examination. After this, the SEMs are shared with all GREIVIO members for their approval or feedback, and questions are formed out of this, which are sent to the state authorities. And after that, the most interesting and difficult phase is evaluation visits, and evaluation visits is planned by the Secretariat in conjunction with the appointed reporters and in communication with the state authority. Reporters and Secretariat members visit to the country. We are usually 2 reporters on a country visit. It depends. Sometimes if the country is very big or the issue of domestic violence is very challenging and something extraordinary in the country, we might have 3 reporters in this country and 1 member of the Secretariat, and we are usually joined by 2 other experts appointed by the Secretariat in discussion with the reporters, and this might be country experts or experts on some specific areas that we feel needs more careful consideration during the visits. Visit is very busy as usual. We meet with the state authorities, with staff from various ministers, with practitioners, researchers, NGOs, etc. As reporters, we agree between us who is going to lead each meeting and who is going to tackle each issue. If the experts have a specific issue to raise, they are given the space to do so also. We also turn to the secretariat for support during the meetings, and each day is very intensive, a lot of meetings. At the end of each day we held the debriefing meetings among ourselves, where we briefly go over what we learned, identify further issues or questions for the following meetings, identify issues that we think will need to go into the report itself. So if someone thinks that this evaluation visits in different countries is a pleasure, it's definitely very hard work, and as usual there is no time to look outside even, because we are very shrinked in the timing, and there's a lot of meetings and very busy agendas as usual. Next step is hardest part of this process also. It's preparing of the draft GREIVIO report. So based on all the information gathered, discussed and agreed within the country team, we are drafting a report in written, and the experts are usually asked to send in written report on their specific areas of competence to go into the draft report also. And the members of the secretariat usually draft the bulk of the report and send to the reporters for adding, to amending, acquiring, plus any other feedbacks, etc. And this report is then made accessible to the other GREIVIO members for their additional feedbacks, and the next step is adopting of the report. Once we have the feedbacks from every member of the GREIVIO, we are discussing it, and then we are sending it to the state authority for their information and possible feedback. Sometimes feedback received results in some minor changes to the report, and so if so discussed and agreed by the secretariat rapporteurs, and we are finalizing the reports and approving the report, and this is the best part in this process. Our role is ending here, and this is then the report will be sent to the committee of the parties for their adoption, and the report is made public after its adoption, together with any comments received from the party concerned on the Istanbul Convention website. Yeah, it looks like this procedure. First, GREIVIO's baseline questionnaire, state report and NGOs other information, examination of the GREIVIO, country visits, transmissions to the state parties, the draft report, transmission of the committees of the parties report, transmission to national parliament, and adoption. Yeah, it's the way how the reports is adopting. I mentioned in the beginning that I would like to talk about the special inquiry procedures. The special inquiry procedure, it's a very important procedure, and it arises when there is a large scale or serious violation of the convention. And in this case, GREIVIO requests urgent report from the government, and also GREIVIO seeks additional information, and GREIVIO reporters carries out inquiry, including the fact-finding visit where necessary, and GREIVIO examines all the informations and after transmits of findings, recommendations to the governments and to the committees of the parties and committees of the ministers, but it happens very rarely. But the GREIVIO has the mechanism for special inquiry procedures, and it's I think it's very important. Yes. Now, as I guess most of you are the NGO representatives here, most of the participants, and so I would like to talk about the role of NGOs in this process, in the work of GREIVIO, and I would like to say that these NGOs engagement and activism is crucially important for us. Why? Because you see, it happens that we are getting the information from the state report. As state reports, as usual, are not very objective, and so in this case, when we have the shadow reports submitted by the NGOs, it's very useful and very helpful for us because in most aspects we are considering NGO approaches. And it is not only our practice. NGO work and civil society engagement is written in the previous in the Istanbul Convention, and the convention says, Article 68 says that the GREIVIO may receive information on the implementation of the convention from non-governmental organizations and civil society. And also we have the rules of procedures, grievous rules of procedures, and the grievous rules and procedures say that the GREIVIO may invite non-governmental organizations and other members of civil society active in the areas of concerns to GREIVIO, in particular women's organizations, national coalitions of the organizations, and national branches of international non-governmental organizations to provide it with information. So these provisions in the Istanbul Convention and the rules of procedures gives us the opportunity to be more effective, to address to the particular NGOs, to ask them to present the shadow reports or other informations, and so it is always very helpful for us, as well as it has a double effects because the government also knows that the NGOs are eligible to develop the shadow reports, and so they are trying that governmental reports to be prepared in more realistic manner. So your role as NGO representatives is crucial in the process, and we are very grateful, and the NGO's work is always very much appreciated by GREIVIO. What is our experience so far? What's our observations from these processes? The GREIVIO relations procedures so far has shown that the efforts are being intensified to collect data on the different forms of the violence against women, but the definitions and the methods are not always harmonized across entities, or that important data categories such as sex and the relationships of the perpetrator to the victims are still lacking. For example, it's rarely possible to trace a domestic violence case as it moves through the system. It means that from the reporting stage to the investigation, prosecution, and the judiciary, and new methods such as the introduction of the unique person numbers are being tried and tested to resolve this issue, which is a welcome step. Yeah, it was our experience and our observations, and now I would like to give you the numbers about the GREIVIO work. GREIVIO have had 23 meetings. Latest two meetings was online and because of the pandemic. Of course, we are very regret because of this. This process is very live, and so sometimes the online meetings are not always very effective, but still we are very happy that we managed to not to interrupt our work and managed to provide these meetings online. The GREIVIO already adopted 13 evaluation reports: Austria, Monaco, Albania, Denmark, Turkey, Montenegro, Sweden, Portugal, Finland, France, Serbia, Belgium, Netherlands, and this month, in few days, GREIVIO will publish 3 other reports, as a report on Malta, Spain, and Andorra, and these reports were adopted online by GREIVIO last meetings. Yes. Next, it was very brief about the GREIVIO work, about our work, and if you allow me now, I would like to be to talk about the Istanbul Convention, but I will talk about very core issues of the Istanbul Convention, and I will do it briefly. I see that I have time, so I will continue with the Istanbul Convention, and the content of the convention. You know that it's an approach based on 4 P's. It's a prevention, protection, prosecution, and integrated policies, but I will start from the integrated policies, and the article number 7 of the Istanbul Convention determines the integrated policies and states and says that the states are expected to adopt and implement integrated policies, that is to say policies that are comprehensive because they encompass a multitude of the measures and offer a holistic response to the violence against women, and coordinated policies because they imply cooperation among various official bodies and non-state actors. And the elaboration and implementation of this policy should be ensured through the allocation of the appropriated financial resources, the contributions of the NGOs and civil society, the creation of an official coordinating body, data collectors on the researches. There is allocation of the financial resources. Article number 8 states have to allocate finances and human resources to fund activities carried out by public authorities, actions organized by civil society organizations. If you pay attention, text of convention is very much focused on the NGOs also, because the NGOs role is very much highlighted in the different articles. Article number 8 says that the states must allocate appropriate resources, thus suitable funding to implement the targeted measures. And the contribution of NGOs and civil society, it is article number 9 in the convention, and this article says that the civil society organizations and the NGOs are often the main providers of services for victims of domestic violence and violence against women, as they are providing for victim shelters, hotlines, legal aid, medical and psychological counseling, and the convention recognizes the role and underlines the necessity for states to support the NGO civil society organization activities, to rely on their expertise and collaborate with them during the different stages of the policy making process. Also, it's important to have the coordinating bodies, and state has the obligation to establish the coordinating bodies to entrust one or more official bodies in charge of 5 tasks, and these tasks are the coordinating, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating measures devised by parties to comply with the Istanbul Convention, and to coordinate the collection of the data. And the states must ensure that these bodies are aware of international cooperation activities, including mutual legal assistance in civil and criminal matters. These bodies should have the ability to set up working relations with their counterparts in other parties in the convention also. And the data collection is very important issue, and parties are required to collect disaggregated statistical data at regular intervals and support research on violence against women and domestic violence. And I would like to mention that this data collection is challenging nearly in every country. Nearly in every country, data collection is challenging. States must conduct population-based surveys on the prevalence of all forms of the violence against women, and information collected must be available to the public and submitted to the GREIVIO. Another P is the prevention, and of course prevention is very important part of the Istanbul Convention, and not only Istanbul Convention, but in the process of fighting violence against women and domestic violence. And the drafters of the convention have stressed that existing patterns of the behavior of women and men are influenced by prejudices, gender stereotypes, and gender biased customs or traditions. Personally, for me, it was one of the most interesting part in the convention because maybe because I'm also from the country where the stereotypes, cultural prejudices, and some patterns are very strong, and I think that in many countries this is very challenging issues. So the convention very clearly says that the existing patterns of the behaviors of women and men are influenced by prejudices, gender stereotypes, and gender-biased customs or traditions, and this it is not possible that this prejudice this should not be the for mm, accessing the violence against women because of these factors, yeah. And consequently parties must promote long-term change to mentalities and attitudes to overcome gender stereotypes and to prevent violence against women through the five means, and it's a awareness raising, educational programs, training of professionals, preventive interventions and treatment program for perpetrators, and participation of the private sector and the media. It's these articles, these provisions is not quite challenging everywhere because approaches towards, for example, public awareness is quite different. So sometimes it happens that the public awareness issues has a very formal nature, and it is not focused on the target groups, or it is not goal oriented. So this is a factors which is very important for Istanbul Convention, and in the implementation process of the Istanbul Conventions, these issues are always very challenging. Yeah, for example, now we are talking about rising awareness. Yeah, Article 30 stress the need to increase the level of public awareness of the different forms of violence against women through gender-sensitive campaigns, and ensures the wide public dissemination of information on measures available to prevent and delegitimize violence against women while supporting the victims. There is a number of sources and methods how to increase public awareness, leaflets, online information, hotlines and shelters, and number of source methods, and also convention states that it's necessary to organize the campaigns on a regular basis and at all levels, on local, regional, and national levels, and to collaborate with civil society and partners with relevant experience, and emphasizing the harmful consequences of violence on children. Education is very challenging because we have the issues with education in every country. Actually, I think that it's new to integrate the gender approaches in the education system and curriculum, and especially to integrate it in the education system in the countries such as Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, or these Caucasian countries and post-Soviet countries also. I consider it's quite challenging, but it is not easy also not in the European countries, because there is also number of issues regarding this. But Article 14 stresses the necessity to raise long-term awareness among children by including teaching materials on gender equality and violence against women in both formal and informal education. And formal education institutions at all levels must introduce teaching materials on gender equality and violence against women. Because of the provisions, number of countries lacks this opportunity, and sometimes in the countries there are introduced some quite another issues, and countries are claiming that is in compliance of the Article 14 of the Convention, and the Article 14 also says that the state should also ensure that the information as education facilities also promote gender equality principles should be provided. And the training of the professionals. You see, I can say that after Istanbul Conventions, situation from these directions has very significantly changed, because country started on training the professionals. Why? Because Article 15 obliged states to provide or strengthen training for professionals in regular contact with victims or perpetrators or violence covered by the convention. And while states can choose how to organize these trainings, they must be supported by clear protocols and guidelines, which effectiveness should be regularly monitored. They must encompass the prevention and the dedication of the violence against women, the needs and the rights of the victims, and the avoidance of the secondary victimization. And the professionals targeted may be healthcare practitioners, social workers, teachers, or members of the judiciary, before and after they take on their duties, initial and necessary trainings. But you see what happens in practice. We see that many countries are providing trainings for professionals, but GREIVIO listed 12 groups of the professionals who need the trainings on the issues, but unfortunately not all the groups are covered by the countries as usual. And the domestic and sexual violence perpetrator programs is very challenging and important, because Article 16 requires states to set up or support government to work with perpetrators of domestic violence and sex offenders, and this program should aim at behavioral change and prevent cases of the repeat offense, and be implemented in close cooperation with special support services. So I would like to pay your attention on this chapter. Convention says that this program should be behavioral changes. Unfortunately, we had the issues when states provided anger management trainings for perpetrators, and states are claiming that this is a programs who are focused on behavioral change. Unfortunately, anger management trainings is not the same as the programs who will be focused on behavioral change, and it's quite different, and it does not meet the same requirements as behavioral change trainings. Of course, it's not an easy task. This needs a lot of resources, but it's an only effective approach to change the perpetrators' behavior. And anger managing trainings is not efficient and enough for this. Participation of the private sector and the media is very important, and Article 17 aims to broaden the involvement of the private companies and the media in the prevention of the violence against and domestic violence, and participating in the development and implementation of the policies from this direction is very necessary, and also it's very necessary to establish guidelines and self-regulatory standards to strengthen the respect of women's dignity. Cooperating with the state in raising children's and parents' awareness on the use and the misuse of the information and communication environment, which can spread degrading sexual and or violent content, also is very important and mentioned in the convention. The next part is the protection. To overcome the various consequences of violence, the Convention stresses the need to support assist and protect victims from any further act of violence, secondary victimization, and economic dependencies. And to achieve this, state must set up services and support and its infrastructure, mainly victims' access to relevant information, victims' assistance in individual and collective complaints, general support services, specialized support services, a telephone hotline free of charge, support services for victims of sexual violence, and protection and support for child witnesses. It is very important. And also victims should have access to information. The convention says that to empower victims to take decision in the aftermath of violence, states must ensure that victims have access to the information on support services and legal measures available to them, and information should be provided in a language that the victims can understand in a timely manner. And it should be ensured the assistance in compliance is very necessary, and they ensure victims access to applicable regional and international individual collective complaints mechanisms, and knowledgeable assistance to victims in presenting complaints must be also promoted. And one of the main challenging, interesting, and problematic issues is the shelters, general and specialist support services, and different countries have different approaches to the shelters, but the convention says that they should be provided general support services, and general support services means that ensuring victims access to public welfare or social services not specifically for victims of the violence against women, but which have a large role to play. It may be legal aid, psychological counseling, financial assisting, housing, training, and so on. And professionals of the services should be trained to assist victims of violence against women in their specific circumstances. And another Article 22 of the Convention says that the special support services should be provided, and the short and long-term support services only directed to victims of the violence against women must be available in all regions of the country. And the aim is to providing shelters, outreach services, legal aid, psychological counseling, trauma care, collection of medical evidence for victims of the rape, and so on. And shelters also it should be obligation to set up the easily accessible shelters, preferably around to the clock, to provide safe accommodation to the victims and their children, and a sufficient number of the shelters, one family place per 10,000 inhabitants, is the most optional issue and realistic to have the shelters, one family place per 10,000 inhabitants. Next is a particular support for victims of sexual violence and child witnesses, and support for victims of sexual violence. It's Article 25 and this article states that must set up easily accessible rape crisis centers or sexual violence referral centers, and center staff should be trained to provide medical and forensic examinations, trauma support, and counseling to victims of sexual violence. It is very important issues because sometimes it happens that the untrained staff is a reason of secondary victimization of the victim. So it is very important to have the very trained and prepared staff in the crisis centers, and a sufficient number of rape center crisis. Also, it is very important. It is 1 per 100,000 inhabitants in even geographical spread. And it is also very important to protect and support for child witnesses, and considering child witnesses needs and rights when providing protection and support services to victims, also very crucial, and including age-appropriate psychological counseling for child witnesses of all forms of violence. No, you know that telephone helplines is one of the most effective tools, both for preventing and supporting the victims, and states are required to set up statewide around-the-clock telephone helplines free of charge that cover all forms of the violence against women. Helplines must be based on confidentiality and provide advice to callers in relation to all acts of violence covered by the scope of the convention, and all helplines set up in Council of Europe members are available on the Istanbul Convention page of the Council of Europe website. And sometimes it happens that the helplines are not effective because they have no access in the midnight, so it means that this helpline is not effective, and so it should be 24-hour access should be guaranteed on the helplines. And the training staff of the helplines is also very important in these cases. Yeah. And what about the prosecution? To enable criminal investigation and the prosecution of the perpetrators or any type of violence covered by the convention, even if the victims withdraws the complaint, prosecution is understood to be achieved by the criminalizing and punishing all the forms of violence covered by the convention, and ensuring the immediate responses of the law enforcement agencies to call for assistance and to dangerous situations, and providing victims with access to the special protection measures during the investigation and judicial proceedings is a part of the prosecution. And criminalizing and punishing violence, it's a chapter number 5, states that the obligations in the area of the substantive law which encompasses how crimes are punished and victims compensated by the law, and this states that the obligation to criminalize the following forms of the violence against women is necessary. It's applied psychological violence, physical violence, stalking, sexual violence, forced marriage, forced and abortion and sterilization, female genital mutilations, sexual harassments, criminal or other legal sanctions. Yeah, and it's very important provisions of the Istanbul Conventions. Based on the provisions, number of countries changed their regulations, and the listed actions became the criminalized. Offenses, yeah, offenses. It's Article 44, punished by decisive sanctions. Sanctions must be decisive and can include deprivation of the liberty leading to the extradition. States must adopt measures to supervise convicted perpetrators and to withdraw parental rights if the best interest of the child is threatened, and aggravating circumstances in case of intimate relationship, close relationship of the family violence, repeated offenses, presence of child witness, violence committed by the multiple perpetrators, use of a woman by the perpetrator, offense resulting in severe physical, psychological harm. It is aggravating circumstances in the cases, and the next is addressing protection of victims irrespective of any legal proceedings. It's emerging bearing orders and restraining and protection orders, and they can be issued on ex parte basis for a specific period without undue financial and administrative burden placed on the victims. Number 6, chapter number 6, it's a special protection during the investigation and the trial. Ex officio prosecution means that this investigation and prosecution in case of physical and sexual violence, forced marriage, FGM, forced abortion, and sterilization shall not depend wholly on the victims complaining and shall be continued even if the victims withdraw her or his statement or complaint. It's very important. It's really important provision, and I would like you to pay the attention on this provision. And to protect victims during the proceedings, there shall be this possibility for governmental body, NGOs, or domestic violence counselors to assist victims during investigations and judicial proceedings, and also protective supportive measures during judicial proceedings are the protection of the victims, their relatives and witnesses, right to be heard and to be provided with a competent interpreter, right to be informed of the perpetrator's release or escape, right to benefit from support services, right to testify in the courtroom without the perpetrator, right to the special protection measures for the child victims and the child witnesses. A number of issues are covered by the European Court of Human Rights also. Unfortunately, in all countries, it is not possible to provide the legislation with full compliance of the Istanbul Convention. For example, to provide to testify courtroom without the perpetrators. It's challenging in many countries, especially in post-Soviet countries. It's very challenging, but still, Convention considers that it is very important, and states should take into consideration these issues. And of course, states must also provide free legal aid to victims under the condition provided in the national legislation. Yes, and the final remarks, the Istanbul Convention, it's an intersectional lens. What it means, the principle of non-discrimination. Article 4 ensures that the Istanbul Convention protects all women. It's very important. All women, irrespective of who they are and where they come from, when serving victims or violence against women, there shall be no discrimination on the basis of their sex, gender, race, color, language, religion, political opinion, national social origin, and so on and so on. You know this list, and special measures aiming to prevent violence against women and protect women victims shall not be considered as discrimination under the terms of the convention, and it is also very important. Quite important and challenging issue is the migrant women. Yeah, and unfortunately, the legislation and the practice towards the migrant women is very challenging in many countries. And Article 58 introduced the possibility of granting independent resident status to migrant women victims of the violence against women who derive their residence permits from their abusive spouse or partner. It is also requires states to suspend any expulsion proceedings originally initiated against their abusive spouses, but which affect their victims too, and to enable victims to apply for an autonomous residence permit. It's very important also, and so two situations justify an independent resident permit. First, if the competent authority considers victims that stay are necessary due to the victim's personal situation, it's a first, and necessary for the conduct of the investigation and the criminal proceedings, and states shall also adopt the measures for victims of forced marriage who, being forced to live abroad, have lost their residence status in the country where they usually reside by helping them to reobtain it. And asylum seekers, it's the last issue in this presentation. Article 16, it's an obligation to recognize gender-based violence against women as form of persecution under the meaning of the Refugee Convention and as form of a serious harm that gives rise to subsidiary protection status. States must adopt a gender-sensitive approach when establishing refugee status and international protection, and states must also introduce gender-sensitive procedure guidelines and support services for asylum seekers and prevent and protect women asylum seekers from any form of violence against women. And Article 61 reiterates the non-refoulement principle for victims of the violence against women in need of protection regardless of the residence status. it was not very shortly about the convention, but I used my opportunity. I had the time, so I talked details about the Istanbul Convention. But now I would like to tell you the myths about the convention. 5 common misconceptions about the convention, which some member states use as arguments for not ratifying it, and how to counter them. Myth number first is that the convention supports a destructive gender ideology. Um, it's false. The fact is that the treaty does not force any gender ideology on the states. The text just separates the terms sex and gender. Yeah, gender refers to how social structures can lead to a lack of respect for women's rights, resulting in increased violence, as serving as an independent interpretation tool. And regardless, it does not force the countries to adopt that position, nor does it replace any biological definition. It's number 1 myth. Number 2 myth is that the convention legitimates illegal migration. No, the convention does not call for a new refugee status. Instead, it is about women's rights to a dual asylum procedure, taking into account why they are seeking protection, adopting a gender-sensitive approach, and additionally considering the violence aspect. Number 3. It's some countries claim that they already have sufficient legislation and that there is no need to join the convention. It is also false. The fact is that it is not a fair reason to not ratify or implement it. The convention covers the elimination of all types of violence, and no country is free from violence against women. No country is free from violence against women, and it is also primarily a complementary legal document, bringing a specific added value in this area compared to previous international texts. Number 4 is that the Istanbul Convention legally forces countries to introduce a third gender. It's an absurd. No, as the convention does not oblige states to recognize a third sex under domestic law. The term third sex does not even appear in the text of the Istanbul Convention. It's something illusion. And number 5 is that the Istanbul Convention threatens the nuclear family and traditional family values. It is also false, as the convention does not stipulate any such views, and ratifications does not lead to forcing men or women into a certain lifestyle. It merely stipulates that women who are subjected to domestic violence have the right to receive protection, and this supports their need to live a violent relationship. These are the myths about the Istanbul Convention, and some groups are basing their agenda on this myth, but we have the facts against this myth, and we have the impact of the convention. Early fact of the convention, which is quite tangible at this moment, that it is a trend toward an increasing criminalization of the different forms of violence against women. For example, as stalking, FGM, forced marriages. The setting up of the coordinating bodies in many countries is very important because they are focused on the violence issues, and large-scale training initiatives is quite visible and tangible, because in all countries who ratified the Istanbul Conventions, government took the responsibility to provide large-scale training initiatives and to train different groups who have the touch with the victims or with this issue also, and it's very tangible and notable. And the rising visibility of the violence against women in the public sphere also is clear. Now some 10 years ago, the topics in the media or in the society for discussion was very rare, but today it's very clear and very active and very significant significant, and of course active engagement by national and international NGOs advocating for support and protection of the victims, resources allocation, and using the Istanbul Convention generally as a tool to rally behind is very important and very significant. So I can say that the Istanbul Convention already has its impacts, and this impact is very clear and also very much focused to eliminate the issue. So it is important to ratify these conventions, as first of all it brings the changing of the legislation and improving the legislation. For example, in Georgia, dozens of the law were introduced and changed, and amendments were provided in the legislation, and so now we have the quite good relationship from this perspective. And the final word, I would like to read the quotation of the Marcelino Naudi, GREIVIO president, who participated in the debates, and when they arrived in Armenia, there was a protests against the Istanbul Convention, and she stated that the Istanbul Convention does not define family. It does not promote a particular type of family. The Istanbul Convention does not say a family consists of X, Y, Z. It does not define family at all. What the Istanbul Convention tries to do is to protect women wherever they are, whether they are at home, whether they are on the street, whether they are at work, because violence against women sadly occurs everywhere and anywhere. Now we also say that the convention should apply generally to all women, regardless of who they are, whether they are Roma women, Muslim women, regardless of their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, if they are lesbian women, if they are heterosexual women, regardless of who they are, none of them should be excluded from receiving help and support and protection from violence against them. So in spite of we have a lot of problems, we have a lot of challenges, we have some very uncommon things happening in our countries, I believe that we can change the violent world. So I'm again very grateful for your dedication towards this issue, because I know that you are very much focused on these issues, and you are doing an outstanding job in your respective countries, and not only in your respective countries. So please accept my sincere appreciations toward your work, and I'm very grateful for this, and also I'm very grateful that you listened to me for this time. It's not a short time for online presentations, definitely it's much time, so I'm sorry if I tired you. Thank you again. So you can find me on Facebook as Lado Mkervalishvili, and here is my email, and I will be very glad to have the feedback from you, and wish you again success in your professional career and private law life. Thank you very much, and if you have questions, I'm ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lado. It was very informative presentation, very great presentation. Thank you very much. Please, dear participants, you can write down the email and Facebook nickname of Mr. Lado Mkervalishvili. And please, you can now ask the questions to the speaker. You can raise your hand, or you can switch on your microphone now.
May I?
Yes, Marta.
Thank you, Lado. It was really interesting, especially for me, because in Ukraine we have a huge discussion about Istanbul Convention and about GREIVIO perspectives, and I have one question about new convention. Did you see this new draft of new convention about it is a convention from Ordo Iuris about safety family. About safe of family or something. Did you see this convention? The draft of convention, and what do you think? Is it dangerous for general situation with ratification process of Istanbul Convention in Europe?
You see, I don't think that it's dangerous because this new provisions, it's a part of the propaganda against the democratic values. And so I think that it has very short-term impacts. So when we had the example of the Croatia, the same was happened there, but the government of the Croatia managed to organize the progressive groups. Sufficiently manage these progressive groups against these not very progressive groups. And so I consider that it depends on the NGOs. First of all, it depends on the NGOs' pressure to the government and about the creating of the public opinion. So we see that some groups, these groups are very brave in their expressions. And sometimes the persons who are on the right side, they lack of this braveness. Yeah, so we should be brave to overcome their messages and to spread the right messages against these messages. And so I think that it's a tendency, but sometimes as we have seen, these tendencies has very short impacts. And if this is a values, and this is a common values, and so if number of countries, number of activists, number of the politicians will unify around the right messages and progress, so I think that this success will be on our side. Thank you, Marta.
Thank you very much for your question, Marta. Other questions, if you have any?
I talked so much that there is no questions.
Maybe yes.
I entered in the details. So if there is no questions, so I will again I thank you. I'm very thankful for the organizers of this event and wish you good luck and success in your work. Have a nice day and wish to have the success in this event, and special greetings for the persons who I know personally. Kalbatono Christina, greetings from here, and let me say goodbye.
Can I say something?
Please, Lika.
I want also to thank very much Mr. Lado for his outstanding support to gender equality and women's empowerment, and for a voice from our little sub-region in GREIVIO. So we count on you, Mr. Lado.
Thank you. You are the champion in this pair, Kalbatono Lika. You were the first and still the most outstanding for promoting gender in Georgia. I'm just new little gender guy in Georgia. Yeah, I was known as gender guy. Yeah. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much, dear Mr. Lado. Thank you, Lika. We have today new participants. That's why I would like to ask you, Lika, say some words about our GNAP for information for all participants. And after that, we will meet all again at 12:30 with the presentation of Mrs. Gohar Nazarian, the impact of anti-gender movements of the process of ratification of the Istanbul Convention in Armenia. But now, Lika, some words about GNAP, about our gender network platform.
Thank you very much, Antonina. I would never be tired of talking about GNAP, as it is my beloved network. And the fact that the network was created by our common effort, by our commitment, by our understanding and the internal dialogue is very important, because the value of grassroots connectivity, grassroots dialogue, grassroots understanding, nothing can compensate to this. This is the most valuable. Solidarity among feminists, understanding of pressures and difficulties, which are very much political and very much similar in our countries, unfortunately. And that's why for me it's a big pleasure to see that we did it, that from 6 countries, organizations could unite on a basis of solidarity, understanding, importance of our cooperation and collaboration, both internally and externally. And it's a common value, it's a common creation, and I think that we will all benefit from it. There will be no losers, only benefit from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lika. Marta, some words about our project to new participants, please, as you are the leader of this project. Switch on your microphone, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have not big, but joint project between 6 feminist organizations, six countries, and we create GNAP. It is first our joint project, and in this project we concentrate on right radicals or different anti-gender challenges and situation with ratification of Istanbul Convention. We had many changes on our project because times are really hard, and I hope it will be good results because now we work hard on for opening our platform, online platform, GNET platform, and on this platform we will have all our session on this feminist school, and it will be a platform for different kind of searches.